Hi, it's Vera. Welcome to episode 10 of season 2 of the PL Pod. This is my last podcast as Poet Laureate for the City of Greater Sudbury. And today, my guest is someone who has been with me since the very first podcast, since it was in the proposal stage. My behind the scenes go-to person, Pierre Dubuc, is here with me today. Pierre is the coordinator of outreach, programs, and partnerships at Greater Sudbury Public Library. Welcome, Pierre.
Thank you. It's an honor, Vera, to be on the podcast.
Instead of fixing it from behind the scenes.
Exactly. It's exciting.
Hey, listen, you're making me sound bad.
No, I'm thrilled to be here and I'm excited to be on this very last episode. As like you mentioned, in your role as Poet Laureate, it is the last episode, and I'm very thrilled to be here, Vera.
Thank you. I have mixed feelings. I'm a little bit sad that it's over. So we've heard your title. Now, what is it that you do on a day-to-day ongoing basis, if you can tell my public?
For sure. I'll try again. I'm a talker, so I like to talk. So, you may have to rein me in a little bit, which is okay.
It can be done.
So, like you mentioned, I'm coordinator of outreach programming and partnerships at the GSPL, and it's an honor to have that role. I've been with the Greater Sudbury Public Library since 2008. I've gone everywhere from being a part-time citizen service representative to, and then I had a very lengthy career in programming where I was children and youth programmer. And so that led me to an excellent opportunity in becoming the coordinator of programming at the GSPL. And so my day-to-day is much different throughout a pandemic as compared to in normal times. But essentially, I'm in charge of a wonderful team of programmers who are amazing people and have done incredible things throughout this pandemic. And so I manage them, the programming that happens at all 13 locations in the Greater Sudbury area. And I also take part in discussions with regards to partnerships. I'm the unofficial marketer for the library sometimes, where I do a lot of graphic design work, lots of social media work, and also I'm involved with a lot of different community organizations, whether I'm that bridge person to help them support what they're doing through the library system, or supporting them with programming. So that could vary within events, or it could also vary with regards to virtual programming. For example, we've teamed up with some amazing community partners to do virtual programming. And one of the other duties, and wonderful duties, may I add, that I have is I get to work with a Poet Laureate. It's been a delight working with yourself, Vera. So those are kind of some of my key duties that I do I have under my belt.
Well, and I've seen some of the program results on the website, and it is a lot, and it is a great thing to do. I have enjoyed the cooking segments very much. It's a nice break for me. So, the new laureate is in the wings, so to speak. It's going to be coming soon. And once you know what the candidate is planning to do for their term, what happens from your perspective?
Well, the first step would be, like, again, one of the things I forgot to mention. This is really my first go at working with a laureate to this degree, being that I got the coordinator position just before the pandemic, just before you got the role as well.
Yeah.
So for me, that experience was kind of a key thing for me. And I've had a great mentor in Jessica Watts, who used to be the coordinator in my position in years past. And I got to see how she managed things. So I kind of pulled a little bit from what Jessica did in her tenure and just kind of adapted to who I am, what I do. And I've learned a lot throughout this role process. But essentially, I think it's just making sure that we can make it happen is usually the first step is, seeing what, for example, the legacy project, seeing what the legacy project would end up being, or some ideas, and that usually would sometimes it ends up becoming conversation between the laureate and the person in charge from the library's end. And so basically we kind of put everything in perspective, and we try to make it happen as best as we can. And that's essentially been how we've operated with it. And it really depends on the laureate. Some laureates have different aspirations, and which means different types of support. So sometimes it's more financial support, sometimes it's more let's say marketing support. Some laureates have been pretty good at marketing themselves to some degree. So it's been a mixed bag on how we work with the different laureates. And that's a fun and unique thing, I feel, that we work with different people and different aspirations.
Well, everybody comes in with their own idea of how they're going to go forward. And you and I have had regular monthly planning sessions. More than that, if it needed to happen, if we were doing something special. And I think, for you and I, we have found that it's a matter of discussion and scheduling, and then the follow through is a lot easier. And once everyone knows what's expected, nothing falls through the cracks. And I like that. But you have a lot of duties under your title. How much of your time is devoted to the laureate position, for example?
Yeah, and I think that I like this question because I can look at it in two different aspects. We've had the challenge of the pandemic, which is one of the things I'm sure that will come up in the discussion quite a bit. But essentially, the way that I've operated, again, I only have these full 2 years to reflect on as far as how we've gone about it, with me being in the coordinator seat. So I know that for me, the way from month to month, we've had our meetings. We've kind of identified the things that we want to accomplish, the things that need to be done, and so usually what I try to do is sparse out my time, because I do like beyond organizing my team, meeting with them and having meetings on a weekly basis, and sometimes taking part in programs or taking part in conversations with partnerships, or different kinds of events. I've had to really kind of put things into blocks. And so that's how I've gone about it. I've put the Poet Laureate role into a block where I know that this is how much time I have to dedicate to it. And I do my best within that block. And if I have to give a little bit more, I try to make it work as best as I can. And I've had to learn on my own throughout many years. And I think this is advice that everyone knows, that you have to be careful when you have a lot of things on the go. It is easy for things to fall through the cracks. So being aware of what you have on the go and being careful about adding too much more is a really important thing. So definitely meetings is excellent, but I mean, and I do want to dive into how much time I spend with regards to the role, which is great, because one of the things that I've had to do on a monthly basis with regards to the laureate role is basically a lot of marketing stuff. So marketing can take a lot of time to some degree. So like whether it's putting together designs for advertising, or designs for example, for the booklet that we put together for Terra North, and the editing aspect of the podcast, which again, if you're not a podcaster, you really don't know how long that can take. And so just to kind of give our listeners a perspective is, you record the podcast. And I mean, Vera, actually, before I go into how long it takes me, let's hear from you on your process before I get to my piece, because my piece is the last piece. You have the first piece. So please incite us on what you dive into while getting ready for the podcast.
Well, I came in here completely blind. I just said to you at the interview meeting, I just really like to do a podcast. And you said, that's fantastic. I'll do it. And I had no idea. And then I had to actually do it. So what I have learned to do is write a script. At first, I was doing them myself. I was doing everything. I was my own guest. I was just talking about writing, which got very boring after a while. And I was so pleased to find out I could actually record. I didn't have Zoom back then. I was using my cell phone, and that was all. Just me in the kitchen with a cell phone and papers that I had written out to hold the script. So I would stick pretty closely to the script. Learning how to speak it was one thing, so that everyone is you're speaking slowly enough that everyone is enjoying it, rather than whizzing through things and they don't get anything that you're saying. And then when I started having guests, I chose the guests to be varied, and each one of them was as interesting as I don't know what. Every laureate has been on my podcast. I mean, Daniel Oban was the last, and he is a stellar poet. And I thoroughly enjoyed listening to him. Kim Fauner is very knowledgeable about poetry and can speak on so many different, avenues within poetry. Roger Nash, same thing. Tom Leduc is so enthusiastic about what he does. And he was putting things together as a poet with the Sudbury Writers Guild. Every one of these requires a script, and I supply 5 questions to everybody. I give the offer that if you don't like a question, you can swap one out. That's only happened once. And I think, the questions, I think about the questions too, because I wonder what my people who listen would like, to hear. And so there's a lot of thought goes into that. Then I run through the script a few times. Lucky me, I fell into a tagline right at the beginning. Hi, it's Vera. And then at the end as well. So I know how I'm going to begin and I know how I'm going to end. It's the middle that is really interesting. And so I think once you've done it a couple of times with people, like everything else, it just becomes easier. And I think I love this platform because it's so it's relatable to people. Everyone likes to talk, I think, and everyone likes to listen to somebody at some point. And podcasts are very popular, so I just thought I'd give it a shot. And I have lucked out in that way. That's my process. And then I stop the recording when we're done talking and pray like everything that I haven't mucked it up in some way. And I let it convert itself and I mail it off to you in a Google Doc, and you take care of the magic. And that's how it works.
And so that's great. I just kind of wanted the listeners to get your piece before they got mine, because my piece is really the editing. I love editing, and it's something that we had discussed, that it's not something that I would have imagined me liking or really kind of falling in love with it. But there's something special about editing, and I'll talk about that, because you get to listen to the podcast and then just being able to fix like a small little thing you won't notice because you're listening to the end product, so you don't know. But when you're listening to it, and I'm not saying that you've made many mistakes or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying.
Truly, no.
What I'm saying is more like, if there's a small pause in one of the guests went throughout their speaking points, then it's easy for me to kind of I caught that, I can fix it, and it just flows right in. In some points, I've had to edit like a huge conversation piece and make it flow, and take one conversation, move it to another, and to make it all flow. And I'm using the Terra North PL podcast for that one, because that one we had to kind of integrate two different things, and it turned out so great. And I love doing that one because it was challenging a bit for me. And so the editing process can take up, and it can take up to 4 hours.
Now I feel guilty because my part only takes about 2 hours.
The editing can take up to 4 hours, because one of the things is, number one, I listen to it completely. and I make notes. And then I listen to it a second time and I start pinpointing or marking down the spots that need to be edited. So I usually, and then one by one, I will start editing those pieces that need to be edited. And once that's done, I listen to it again to make sure that everything flows, that I didn't over edit, because you can over edit something to the point where I would cut you off. Because I have done that and I have gone back and I fixed it. And it, like, it's almost like you just start talking or it's in the middle of a sentence, and you just need to make sure that everything flows and that there's no gaps, and it's just very smooth. And so for me, you've made that job easy because, and we've had this conversation from like, I believe the first couple of podcasts, I said, you're just a natural at this. It's almost like you had been doing it before and you're just joking around with me, because I really feel that you were so good at it, just the speaking aspect, but I think your organizational structure and how you prepared them was spot on. But also, one of the things that I kept on being shocked, I'm like, how are you getting such amazing audio? Is what I was always saying, because like your audio was always so clear and clean. And again, like, you know, the crazy thing is that right now we're using so many different things to record ourselves. And we've been lucky to have, you know, telephone recordings or Zoom recordings to be able to work with audio. Pulling audio off of those things is really easy. But your audio has always so clear, and I'm like, my God, like this sounds like legit pro. Like it's very clear, and you can, like, it's like I'm listening to any professional podcast that's out there. And I think that for me, that was an amazing thing to see you just kind of be able to go through that process and do so amazing with the podcast itself from the very get-go. And you made my job easier in that front. And
well,
it was fun.
Actually, probably because I learned to talk at a very young age.
So there's benefits to that, right?
Yeah, and my mother would agree. She talked a lot too.
But yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm always happy to hear that I have made your job relatively easy, because you do have a lot of job. And I wondered also, like, you're a husband and a father of two young children, and you have this job, and I wondered how you keep all the balls in the air during these COVID times, because it has been a lot.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, I'll speak from the heart on that. Like I'm a very social being. I've been a social person since high school, and moving into my adult life, I just became more social, and that's just who I am. And my son is like that too. And so, like for me, I had, you know, it was hard. I've gone through my roller coaster ride throughout the pandemic, where it was just some parts were really difficult, and I'm saying that with also keeping in mind that I'm fortunate, because there are, you know, so many people out there that are struggling through this pandemic in ways that I can't even imagine. And so I talk about my experience very lightly, in the way where I'm you know, I'm taking my experience in the way where I'm talking about it in the way where I had a lot keeping me going. And so work was definitely one of those things. Sometimes throughout it can be difficult, but I mean, being able to, and the way I see it is that, you know, the pandemic came around, and as a library system, one of the most important things that came to my mind is that we need to stay relevant. This is really important. We don't know how long this pandemic is going to last. We need to be around here when this is done. And so like, we've been fortunate enough to keep our operations going throughout this whole 2 years of roller coaster ride. And I'm very, and we were just talking about before the session, but you don't really realize how much you've accomplished throughout a pandemic. And that's a really weird thing. And so for me, my family has been a huge part of me keeping me going. My colleagues, yourself, and a lot a lot of family who, we're there for each other. And the fact that we can keep going throughout this and do what we love to some degree, that's we're fortunate in that front. And that's really what's kept me going. And, we're still going through another stretch of hardness right now, but, it's gonna, and just to speak on yourself, Vera, but you've had to do this role throughout a pandemic. And again, with talking about amazing accomplishments throughout something like a pandemic, what you've been able to put together with the podcast and with your outreach and with your influence in the community, with your mentorship, has been nothing short of amazing.
Well, every single thing that you mentioned has been my pleasure. And, we should change roles now, because I would like to tell anyone who likes to listen to me what it's been like to be in this role for 2 years during the pandemic, when I didn't know how I was going to go forward. I didn't know when I signed on that COVID was going to knock me out of, the community aspect. Everyone else that has had this role has done a great job within the community and really been able to touch the lives of citizens in the city. And I didn't know how I was going to do that. So thank God for Zoom, because it's the one way that I could do it. I've had the Zoom aspect has helped me to do workshops with local people and mentor different groups of people and offer workshops here, there, and everywhere. And I think that, there's been a lot of exciting stuff happen too. And we did, during the summer, we were able to do some really fun things, like go out and do the poetry bombs, and that was fun. And excuse me, and also to for me, going strangely, I was invited to a podcast in England to listen to someone who's in the Haiku Society of America, which I belong to. It was an invitation to hear him read in England, and I thought, well, I've never done that before. So I went, and I enjoyed it so much, I just kept going back, and I got familiar. And they invited me to read, and I was beyond thrilled. So I've done that in England. I've gone to all these conferences that I never would have been able to go to, because physically I would be unable to complete a journey to Seattle to go to a 3-day festival, or even to Vancouver to do a weekend festival that was the Haiku North America. The CBEC one in Seattle was just mind-blowing in its content. And I've gone to readings in Alberta on a month-to-month basis. And it's just, the opportunities that come with this position are huge. And your confidence level, once you see that people accept you and actually think, okay, maybe there's something there, because there will be crises of confidence as you go along, because when you're isolated like this and trying to do a job that's very public, it's hard. Everywhere I've gone, I've spoken of the city and how I love it. Someone from Vancouver said to me, until they heard me talking about how much I love Sudbury, they had no idea the city had anything to offer. And I was highly offended and gratified at the same time, because this city does have a lot to offer. And anyway, I don't want to be anywhere else. And so all those things that I got to do, I'm grateful for that. And I'm so proud of the people I mentored. Many of them have now been published. I'm surprised at, the fluidity of that. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, and I mean, on being that we're on this topic right now, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
go
and
ahead.
I know you told me you're going to mute me if you did.
Yes, I did. If there's a long pause here, he'll cut it out.
It's okay. I get to edit it after. So,
Yeah.
So I mean, I think on that note, you spoke about some of the former laureates and the interactions you've had with them throughout the Legacy Project with the podcast, but just, in general. And being an ambassador for the community and just kind of being able to be a mentor as well. I do want to ask, so what has been your most memorable moment as Poet Laureate?
Whoa, that is putting me on the spot, because I've had so many great moments where I would have to pinch myself under my desk to, to say, am I really doing this? Boy, one, I can't.
Or even a couple, like even some standout stuff that you have, like, I think that to share with the listeners, I think would be really cool.
Well, speaking to Randall Agi, who is the Ontario Poet Laureate, was really fun and informative, and he's such a passionate person about poetry and how he wants to, make changes to society using poetry. That was really inspiring to me.
Awesome.
I interviewed Kamiko Horn, who is 88-year-old haiku poet who is just a force. She teaches haiku in Toronto to school children every year during Poetry Month, which is April.
Yes, it definitely is in April.
Yeah, it is April. Be there or be square.
It's coming.
And of course, I interviewed David Bingham from England, and that was just fun. He sounds like Ringo Starr.
That was one of the funnest ones I edited as well, just to pinpoint. I really enjoyed editing that one.
He's just so, he was and still is really an interesting man and so knowledgeable. And so it was a pleasure to hear what he had to say. And he really strove to deliver some pertinent information to listeners, so that if they thought they would like to, try haiku, or were already haiku people, that he could sort of tweak it for them, and that would be his thing. Those are my three favorite podcasts. The public things, I have to say that as Poet Laureate, and as all the laureates are, I was invited to Wordstock this year. And we were able to go because we were public at the time. And I think that was my first public reading with real people in the audience, and being able to hear them and see them right there. And it was my first applause, and I was like, whoa,
not something you hear throughout a pandemic too, right? And I mean, applause is like an ancient thing now.
Yeah, not that I'm an applause hound. It was just such a surprise that I felt like a little bit like Sally Field, who at the Oscars said, "Oh my, they like me. They really like me." And so there was that gratifying moment. So I thank you, Heather, for having me there, because I really enjoyed it. And I mean, those are the moments, and it isn't even those big moments, like, the bigger moment is sometimes the smaller moments when someone says, I went on Judy Strawn's program, and someone who has in the past told me flat out they hate poetry. I don't think that's possible, but that they listened to the whole program, and I might have converted them to listening to poetry. And I thought, oh, you know what? I think my job is done. I just think it is. So now it really is.
Well, and I mean, I think the other thing too is, and I guess, and that's the thing, like you were just telling me, like with reflecting on what you've accomplished in the last 2 years, and it's crazy to think that it's been 2 years, but like I really see this as kind of taking it all in, right? And really going back and enjoying all that you've done, but at the same time, it's a celebration, because one of the things I did want to bring up is that we weren't sure where the laureate role was going to go back when it was put together in 2019. There were some questions about the role, and is there going to be changes, and so looking at that, and I think that these last 2 years, and I mean this wholeheartedly, but Vera, you've kept this position going, and I really mean when I say this, is that I think that you've reinvigorated the position, especially being that you were able to do this throughout a pandemic and you've accomplished what you have throughout a pandemic is just an amazing feat. And that's one of the huge takeaways that I take from your role and amongst all those other great things that you've mentioned. And I think that that's an important thing for people to know. And you and I encourage the community to dive into writing and poetry and keeping it alive for generations to come and sharing their knowledge for generations to come. And I think that it's so important, and we're very much looking forward into seeing the next laureate and the one after that and the one after that, and expanding our laureate alumni, as I like to call it.
Yeah, well, and I look forward to the next one too, because as we've already said, well, first of all, thank you. I have again enjoyed every minute of this thing, and I have mixed feelings. I'm sorry it's over, but I'm tired here right now. My voice is a little thin. But I think that, every laureate brings their own spin. And I think I'm excited to see what happens next. And I have so admired all those who came before me. And I hope that the ones who come in the future realize how important this role is to the city. We are ambassadors for this city as laureates. We may use poetry to make our stand, but we are still representing the city. And no matter what kind of poetry you do, whether it's slam or whether it's haiku or whether it's, the recognized forms of poetry or, anything new that comes up in the future, whatever it is, it speaks to people on a different level.
Yeah.
And poetry is emotion. It is meant to be the feeling you have when you are, sharing a pleasant moment or an understanding or a commiseration over grief, whatever it is. This is your way to do it. I'm jumping off the soapbox.
No, that's great, Vera. And I mean, that's what we want. And I think, like I said, like I really do. I have huge hopes and I really not hopes. I not that I'm hopeful, but I'm reassured, or I don't know if that's the right word.
You're optimistic, Pierre.
I'm optimistic for the future, and I'm always I'm an optimist person.
So am I.
But I really feel that, like, we've kind of, where the shovel was not fully in the ground before with regards to the position, I feel like it's stuck in there now, and now we can start building and expanding how we do things to some degree. But I think that takes me to one of my last little questions is, where would you like to see the Poet Laureate role go in years to come? And is there something that you can say that you've seen what you've done, you've seen what the other laureates have done, and is there something that you would like to see a laureate do at some point in the terms to come? You've had a podcast. There's been so many ideas. Right? And I mean, and I think that's kind of, it's more of this isn't just more of a curiosity question, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's not up to me to say how things should go, but everything is evolving, and especially within the pandemic, everything has had to change its ways. I want everyone to know that I had pants on during every podcast. But I think that, people who take this position could go through video casts or, I mean, I don't know. I haven't really thought about the future because I'm stuck in the now, but I think that everyone who has their own ideas, like, for example, I think I have decided as part of my legacy project to have a haiku shelf at the library where there will be more resource books for people who now are aware of haiku and want to learn how to write it. They will be able to draw on that, and they will have something there that, they can take out, read, bring back, get it again if they need to. just to see how that works. And the other things that I've done, hopefully, in years to come, the people that I have mentored or have, led in groups that showed an interest, they will pass that knowledge along to other people.
And I think that's what I think that's kind of the end goal is, and I'm sorry, I don't want to be like, I feel like I'm just sucked into this great conversation right now, but
this is going to be the longest podcast ever.
I'm gonna be mindful of the time, but one of the things, honestly, Vera, that I've been just kind of thrilled to see, and again, I've been in programming since 2013, and I've seen Roger, and I've seen Tom, and I've seen all the laureates that have come through. And I'm happy to be able to actually see that camaraderie between the laureates, that thing that binds them, and the transfer of knowledge or support is really a special thing. Whether you were closer with one or another through a guild or not, there's something that binds you all. And one of the best, most amazing things that I've been able to listen to throughout this podcast is that relationship between the different laureates. And so I think that for the laureates coming in, knowing that they have that great alumni support is a huge thing.
Yeah. And I think each one of us wants anyone who listens to know that we represent something that we all take pride in. It's poetry, and it's our city, and it's the communication of what we know to people who are interested in the city. And I think, communication is the key to everything. So as long as we are able to pass on, just as you said, the knowledge of what we know into new people, or even light a fire under some people, to get them started, and then they carry themselves forward. And this new laureate, I have high hopes too. I don't even know who it is yet, but I'm sure it will be a success.
I think so as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed being here and being in the background, and seeing all that you've been able to do with everything that's happened, but just not that, but just having to be part of the process. And I mean, I feel like your legacy project is just brilliant in the podcast, because like you said, it's something current, but at the same time, you develop a connection with the person who's doing it. And one of the things that sticks to me, it will always stick to me, especially with regards to this podcast, is write something. It feels good.
You stole my ending line.
Oh, no. You have the full honor of ending this one. But I mean, I wanted to bring that up because the distinction of that is so great. And the way that you go into that end part of the podcast, and it's so awesome. And like, even just me putting the hashtag, write something, it feels good. Like, it's so great, Vera. And I think like that is, such a great takeaway as well, amongst a lot of other things, with the conclusion of your term, right? And I think that all that you've done has been incredible. And I'm sure all the fellow laureates and our listeners, and our listeners out in Sweden, hello listeners in Sweden,
and Japan, and the UK,
Japan, and
the United States. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, and tuning in. It's been a blast for sure. And so yeah, we had a great chat about statistics with the podcast, and it's been awesome on that front to see the diversified listeners we have, and so to give them that takeaway after each and every single podcast has been such a great thing. And we've had 2 seasons, and to me, it's almost felt like a TV show. And it's been like just a great one, because like you said, you've had such diversified guests. It's been so amazing.
Yeah.
Not one episode is the same. And it's just been great listening. And again, like, I am so proud to have been able to work on this with you. And I want to thank you for that opportunity.
It's been my pleasure. And did we mention the UK? Because I'm going there next month and I don't want them to feel I slighted them,
Oh, no, you did on multiple occasions too.
Okay,
so
good. Well, Pierre, we've come to that place where I have to say it. Listeners, we have reached the end of another podcast, the final one.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you. Thank you for listening. And you know what I always say? If I can get through this without choking, please write something. It feels good.